Okay, I'm joined by Elizabeth Ropp, located in New Hampshire. Welcome to Debt by Natural Causes.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about your work and about this recent acupuncture laws spreadsheet that you've created and shared with everybody. Can you tell us about your background and sort of the big milestones that brought you to where you're at today?
Oh, yeah, sure. I graduated from acupuncture school in 2006. And then I moved to New Hampshire in 2010 to join a big community acupuncture clinic in Manchester, New Hampshire, called the Manchester Acupuncture Studio. The executive director is really well known in the community acupuncture sphere, Andy Wegman. Um, but unlike a lot of people who practice acupuncture in New Hampshire, I didn't go to the New England School of Acupuncture, which was in Watertown, and now it's the Massachusetts Pharmacology School and Health Sciences. It's in Worcester.
So now
Um,
it's a smaller program within this larger university.
it's a program within a larger university. I don't
Okay.
know how if it's bigger or smaller.
Okay.
Um, but I went down to Asheville. I chose a school because comparatively the tuition was really cheap. I
Mm,
couldn't take out a student loan because they weren't available. And I
mm.
didn't understand at the time that the school wasn't accredited. So I didn't understand the risk I was putting myself in.
So you didn't
And
understand because they must not have made that clear enough then, because that's really important, as we
correct.
both know now. Like,
Yes. Oh, when I
so,
applied, I was told we'll be accredited by next year. And I was like,
okay.
oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. But
And
that's not
yeah,
guaranteed, and they never actually achieved accreditation?
no, I went to the Atlantic University of Chinese Medicine. It was in Mars Hill, North Carolina, 30 miles north of Asheville. And it was on a small liberal arts college campus called Mars Hill College.
Hmm.
So I started in 2003, and we were a candidate for accreditation. We heard that it was ACOM at the time. Now it's the ACAHM. We were told how great the school was thought of by ACOM accreditors.
Hmm.
And then as we went along the program and we kept having site visits, we kept hearing more and more how ACOM did not love our program. And then by the time I was graduating in 2006, it was under a teach out, and the
Hmm.
school closed after
Oh,
my class
wow.
graduated.
Wow. So
Yeah.
what does that mean for the students and the graduates?
So we were given plenty of warning. So now what I'm seeing now is many schools are closing and everyone's getting told and then the school closes, like faculty and students.
Right.
But when I was getting ready to start my fourth and final year and I was so exhausted, it was going to be a full 4-year program. I was told, come to a meeting. We have to talk about how the school is closing. And I arrived on a January morning and we were told that they could take my class and the students, a few students who were ahead of me, and my remaining classmates, and they were going to see us through to
Hmm.
graduation.
Okay.
We only needed a handful more courses, and we
Hmm.
needed to finish our clinical hours, and that everyone else would have to transfer.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that was the end of that. And I'll never forget this. I will never forget um, how many people, the acupuncture community in Asheville is really big, and it has been even before there were schools. A lot of healing types love to move to this pocket of the country. It's
Hmm.
really beautiful. It's in the mountains. There's a place called Hot Springs with hot tubs, like north of Asheville, and the Biltmore Estate is there. And there's so many yoga teachers and acupuncturists and massage therapists and naturopaths and um, so that community is really big, and I won't forget the sort of like glee that I was seeing as I ran into people who were acupuncturists or were connected to acupuncturists, and they'd say, We probably knew your school was closing a year before you did with these
Mm,
smiles on their faces.
hmm.
Or I'd run
Well,
into a teacher who taught for one semester who said, well, how are you going to sit for your boards if your school is closing and you're not a candidate anymore?
yeah.
Almost like it was just kind of, it's a sad commentary on what our profession is like. And
Yeah.
the head of a,
So,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, can you unpack that a little bit more? Because I don't know how to fully describe what I'm hearing.
Like,
It's like, well, I think there's like an interest in the dramatic and the churn
yeah,
and sort of behind the scenes. Let me put it like this. Maybe is there an interest in what's going on behind the scenes because it's so opaque and because
yeah,
there's not there's not a lot of open access to information. So when stuff is made public, it's like, I knew it,
yeah.
or like, aha, like,
Some
uh,
drama. Yeah, everyone loves
yeah.
some
I mean,
drama.
I feel that way um, in naturopathic medicine that there's not a lot of we're kind of only getting talking points, like the refined party line, like the talking
Mhm.
points from the national organizations, but there
Oh,
really is no like open conversation. But that might be me kind of putting my experience onto what you're talking about. But
oh no, that's
why do you think people were um, took pleasure in like a school
yeah,
closing? Because that's like, I mean, at first it's like so bad for students.
right. I mean, it could be for any number of reasons looking back on it. I think that the person who founded the school is very polarizing and he ruffled a
Mm,
lot of feathers. And so maybe people were thinking about
yeah.
him,
Mm,
but he actually got edged out by the board of directors, like while I was a student
wow.
there. So, yeah, lots of drama while I was there. And we were just trying to get through the program. Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also could have been there's so many people who practice acupuncture there, but never any cohesive organizations where people were collaborating or working together or finding ways to promote the medicine together that
Yeah.
I just always assumed all of these people wanted less competition because we were in this small
Mm,
area.
okay. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I always assumed. But it's interesting that you mention the party line because I had a wonderful teacher my first semester, Michael Rossoff, a five element teacher, and he quit within my first semester. And a lot of it was because of philosophical differences. We thought it was with the director of our school, but it may have also just been with this may have been around when the first professional doctorate was being discussed. I didn't hear about it until after I graduated,
Mm,
but he was somebody who got into acupuncture in the DC area in the 70s, helping to run a clinic with Asian practitioners. It was a big space, but they partitioned the patients off with curtains. This is just what I remember of him telling me. You'd have to talk to him at some point. And he studied under J.R. Roseley and he studied acupuncture at a completely different time than in 2003
hmm.
and was seeing sort of this move towards let's pretend we're doctors.
Mm,
And I think that he didn't like that and he stormed off.
mm,
And when I was in school, I remember saying, yeah, I get why we need to take anatomy and physiology, but why lab test analysis and why microbiology? And, I didn't, and chemistry. I mean, we were taking herbs. And so if you are going to be an herbalist, maybe taking chemistry is a good idea. And also, I we couldn't ever find the connection between the two, the
yeah.
integrating point. Like I went to massage
Well,
school and we were studying anatomy and physiology throughout massage school, but after the lecture was over, we were actually palpating muscles and
right.
actually thinking about what we just learned. And that
Yeah.
just wasn't the case with the Western medicine courses of my program. It was, all
Right.
right, this is the course that I'm interested in and is relevant to my future. And then these are the courses that we have to take because we have to take them because they're part of the curriculum.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the credentialism and the curriculum bloat is when you start kind of adding on, it's like disconnected didactic
Mm-hmm.
learning, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with safety, first of all. You could say, like, oh, this is important for effectiveness, but then it's like, but show the students how.
Right.
If you can't demonstrate why this increases effectiveness, then it should be like, why is this in the program? And
Mm-hmm.
you were mentioning this whole bachelor's degree thing requirement. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing me back to
Hmm.
why I wanted to talk to you and state law requirements.
Hmm.
So in North Carolina, we were required to get into the school. The school's policy was you needed an associate's degree or higher.
Hmm.
And I happened to have a liberal arts degree that had nothing to do with health sciences, like Western medicine, not even Eastern philosophy. So it was a clean break. I went to college and studied theater and worked in that field for a year and then went to massage school and off to acupuncture school. But I ultimately moved to New Hampshire and I was required to have a bachelor's degree.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, thank goodness I have this liberal arts degree so I
Yeah.
can get licensed in this state that I never thought that I would ever work in. That's
Yeah.
great that I have that.
Yeah.
Thank God I, just went to college like I was told I should and
Yeah.
finished it. And it always stuck out in my mind as weird, but I set that aside for a long time. And then it was after I had teamed up with my friend and my late friend Laura Cooley. She was a trainer with the National Acupuncture Detoxification Association, and she passed 2 years ago. But I teamed up with her because in 2016, New Hampshire was the center of an opioid epidemic, and I said we
Hmm.
need a law that will certify people who are trained in NADA, and she said NADA or equivalent, which was brilliant on her part. And
Hmm.
so we worked with lawmakers on an act relative to acupuncture detoxification specialists. And as we worked on that bill, then it was our board doesn't have term limits. How about that? That's a
Hmm.
discovery. And also,
Hmm.
what we talked a lot about the bachelor's degree because she had trained a good decade or more, no, probably a good 15 years before I had in Texas as an apprentice. So her getting her license in New Hampshire was a lot more tenuous. Like there's a waiver if you don't have a bachelor's degree, and they made her take college level anatomy and physiology, which she had already taken.
Yeah.
So she had like that really bothered her. That was a college level course out of pocket is expensive.
Yeah. Right.
Um, yeah, and I told her we didn't need bachelor's degrees in North Carolina. We needed an associate's to get into the school, but with this state law spreadsheet, I discovered you just need to graduate from a ACAHM approved school.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm starting to find these almost like best practices, sort of, I think, in regulations. And I think, like you mentioned, like NADA or equivalent. Like
Mhm.
you, my opinion is that legislation should not completely lock in a
Yeah.
monopoly because that
Mhm.
stifles the innovation. And
Mhm.
you could say, like, well, just change the law, but it's like that's like such a long, arduous process, and nobody has the bandwidth to do it. So when you grant the regulatory monopoly, the only people who are working in the space and getting the funding are benefiting from that regulatory monopoly, and it becomes a positive feedback loop
Yep,
so that
exactly.
nothing can change and like adapt. You're just kind of stuck in it. Um, and then you kind of have this issue of just like the credentials just kind of don't add up where it's like, oh yeah, you need a bachelor's degree, but it's like,
Mhm.
but why? Like, what's the
Why?
rationale there? And it's like the cost now. I think maybe when a lot of these were put in place, like school was cheaper and the cost of living was cheaper. And now it's
Yeah.
such a different environment because it's like, no, people can't just go and pay like for college credit classes and take that time off work.
Mhm.
And so it's just, I feel like we're stuck. And with the student loan caps now, it's going to like the whole training logic and pipeline is going to like seize up.
Right.
And so now would be the time to make sure that there's a possibility for making an alternative
Mhm.
so that once that kind of stops, once the current status quo stops, then there's at least a chance to do something else. Like somebody could be like, oh, it's worth me putting the time into making a new program because the state has already said there's something to work with,
Right.
as opposed to, nope, sorry, has to be ACOM, and ACOM says 3 years of training. It's like nobody, there's not, at a
Yeah.
certain point, I don't know what to say. It's like there's not enough money to pay for 3 or 4 years of training. There's
Right.
just, it's not there. The money was from loans. The loans aren't getting paid back. It was never, there was never the employment, income feeding back into it. It's just been this propped up thing for the past 20 years.
Right.
So, and I think people just don't grasp that because you kind of have to see several things at once. Like I testified in favor of the Utah law
Mhm.
to like allow the board to define the entry level hours. So you could
Mhm.
do, you can, I forget the exact details, but like you could have ACOM or maybe it's that you have these hours and of course ACOM, meets those hours, far exceeds them. Um, but it was a tie. It wasn't recommended by the committee. It was a tie. But my perspective is that, well, just do it, come back next year when things are worse and
Yeah.
get just kind of show that things are going to get progressively worse over the next few years. And eventually, if you want to have people entering into acupuncture licensure, then something will emerge right out of that. But I think you kind of have to people have to it's very weird because is prevention is not profitable and it is a lot of work
Mhm.
and um it's it's like how do you have it takes a sober calm analysis because it's not but in the time frame when prevention can happen it's not yet right an emergency.
Mhm.
And so everybody's like, well, let's just wait until it becomes an emergency. Even though, as you're saying, like people who see the data, like people who sort of maybe saw data on your school who weren't in the thick of it as students, like they're like, yeah, that looks bad. That's going to close, right? So for me, that's the data I'm seeing
Mhm.
across the industry. I'm like, the math does not math. This is the biggest change in like higher ed in the past 20 years. It was already tenuous before the loan caps. Now you're adding that onto it. Now you're adding cost of living. Now you're adding the way the economy is heading. And I just don't think that people are going to have that discretionary income. And then the loan amount like doesn't work at a small to support like a small school with a small number of students and no endowment. So all of that together, it's like, hey, we should change the regulations that are stifling, that
Mhm.
are dictating, like, no, no, acupuncture education has to be like this, naturopathic education has to be like this. It doesn't. Those rules were put in place
Right.
by a group of people, and I'm glad you said term limits because that's really important too. Because one thing we have, I think, a problem is in alternative medicine, complementary medicine um, it's a lot of times lineage based, and we really revere our teachers and we're glad to learn from the past. But that does not mean the same people should be in positions of
Mhm.
influence for decades.
Yeah.
That's a different, and so I think that's important to voice and understand is that like you really need um, turnover and innovation and say like what are the challenges that we're meeting now so that we can preserve
Mhm.
this legacy.
Yeah. So in New Hampshire, after working on the ADS law, I was so disgruntled with the people serving on the board at that time, and they got to write the rules of the law, and I did my best to stay on top of it, but I was also very new to the process.
Yeah.
But, also realizing like there were two people who finally stepped down from the board after the regulations were written, and they were original board members. It was 20 years later. They'd been on that board since,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
and they finally decided that they'd had enough, that the ADS law did them in, writing those rules did them in. And then the board like handpicked their predecessors.
Mm, right.
And so
Right.
2 years later, I met a bunch of state reps in that process. I had only Democrats because that's all I knew when I got the bill sponsored. But then I met some Republicans who really saw what we were trying to do and were very sympathetic. And some of them I still talk to, and I would tell them like our board doesn't have term limits. And at the moment, our current governor doesn't want licensing boards to put forth their own legislation, and
Mm,
that actually became a problem because I finally got the board to like agree to something, and then they couldn't put a bill forth. But we managed to get around it. But one year, like 2 years after our ADS law had passed, the board put forward a bill. They contacted a state rep who I know and like very much, and I've worked with, and they said that they wanted a bill that would allow acupuncturists who had doctorate degrees to be able to advertise that they are doctors. And that was something that was important to them, and they got a bill for that. Like, that's what's important to the board. Okay. So I called the bill sponsor and I said, Peter, the board doesn't have term limits. And so there are people who will get on there and they will stay there forever. And he's like, well, that doesn't sound right. And I said, we renew every 2 years with the state, and we prove that we've taken our 30 hours of CEUs, but then we also have to prove that we are nationally certified through
mm,
the NCAHM, NCCAOM.
mm.
And that's sort of like being, you know, doubly licensed. And that's,
Right.
like it
Yeah.
should be a choice, to keep that national certification. And
Yeah.
he said, I see your point. And so he put an amendment in. Then the pandemic hit and everything went on pause. And then we came back to all of it a couple of years later. And so we got the term limits in. And I remember overhearing one lawmaker saying, I can't believe we're doing all this work so 5 people can call themselves doctors. But so we got
Yeah.
out from under CCAOM, and the board got term limits. But it wasn't even that. The board finally got term limits, but then um, they would hand pick people to apply, and they wouldn't notify the public that there were
Ugh,
openings on the board. They would
ugh,
hand pick people, and you have to apply online. You have to submit your resume. You have to get letters of recommendation, and it all goes to
right.
the governor's office. And
Mm,
so I would read the meeting minutes of the board, and I'd go, "Oh, well, when was this person added? Oh, well, this
yeah.
person was granted a license and asked to be on the board at the same time. Like, what's going on?"
Yeah.
So it was more reasons for me to complain to lawmakers.
Yeah.
So finally, now they we'll get a public notification if there's an opening on the board. And at
Right.
least right now, I can say we have a really great board right now. And the chair of the board, I wish she could stay for 20 years, but now we have term limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of you can still contribute and participate,
Yeah.
right? Even if you're not a member
Right.
of the board, it's just like you should have some, I guess, power sharing
Mhm.
going through the whole process and the whole like opacity of everything.
Right.
And that I do not understand it. It's like to me, it's just so basic that you should be publishing
Mhm.
basic information
Yeah.
out to your community
Mhm.
because if you're purporting to represent them and speak for them and work for them, then like what's the problem? I guess it shouldn't feel like you're trying to obscure or like hide things. Um, and if yeah, if it's like if you're not comfortable publishing some stuff, then I think you should pause and say, well,
Mhm.
why aren't we? Like maybe we should change it so that we are okay.
Yeah.
That would be a
Right.
signal to improve things and change things, right? So yeah, it's just and that's where you get into the regulatory weeds and you have to kind of like search things out. And then I don't know, like I just found stuff that's like really disturbing, like on its face, where I'd be like, that's wrong, that should not happen. And then you realize like it's been going on for a decade. I'm like, what? Like, is this me? Like, am I am I
Right.
crazy? And um, it it's not that one person's viewpoint has to be everything, but like it's definitely worth talking about as
Mhm.
far as governance.
Right.
How is this open shared governance and how are we allowing distribution of power and reducing these hierarchies and making the governance accessible to people because that determines or that influences funding and the flow of resources, right? That if you mandate ACOM accreditation in 3 years, then that definitely affects the budget of a school. And it has enabled some, let's say, administrator salaries that are inappropriate, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes it's just like inappropriate because it's like compared to your peer set, and that so, but also it's just like contextually inappropriate if my this is my opinion is like why should an admin of a training program be paid like way, way, way more than any of the alumni, than the median earnings of the alumni,
Mhm.
right? Oh, because they have status and because they're doing it's like, yeah, okay, there's value, like they have experience and that's valuable. I get that. But if it's just to say like, oh, well, this is what other administrators get paid,
Right.
right? So that's part of it.
Mhm.
It's like, well, we want to be doctors so we can have the status so we can get
Yeah.
um reimbursed more, we can get more money, and then like then we can say like we can charge more for our training because it's like more status. And I don't I don't get the I don't understand the AHM sort of, well, I understand like the request for comments because they want to get the $200,000 loan cap. Um, but I just don't see that as a strong case because the rules say it like in general, it's a doctoral degree that's required for licensure and it's training beyond a bachelor's degree.
Mhm.
So it's like, I don't know any state that requires the doctoral for licensure. My impression is that it's a master's level credential, whether that's called a master's level certificate or a master's degree, and that you don't always have to have a bachelor's degree to get
Correct.
that. So my feeling is like, I just feel, I kind of feel like they're asking people to support something or to ask for something that they don't fully understand what they're asking for. But I guess they might as well ask and try and get people fired up. But it's like, I don't like, it's very
Mhm.
unlikely. This is like, it's very
Yeah.
unlikely you're going to get this. So that to me means 20,500 cap per year, which I think will be challenged in a lawsuit because, again, might as well go for it. And because they've had the monopoly, they got the funding. So now they can fund a lawsuit along with other affected groups. So who knows what will happen. But right now, it looks like the 20,500 cap. And then if you compare that to the annual cost of attendance, it's not going to, the math doesn't math there.
Right.
And because we can't, again, like if we're not talking about these things openly and looking at the numbers and looking at projections, it's like we're stuck in this, not only this regulatory silo, and maybe the regulatory silo kind of creates this like we're stuck in a vacuum of like understanding we're not connecting without external expertise.
Mhm.
And I think that relates to like not collaborating too.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that, so I wonder if you could speak about these issues with like where collaboration would help things in your view.
Right. So National Acupuncture Detoxification Association was founded in the 80s, like
Mm,
roughly maybe like a few years after NCCAOM and some of these other acupuncture organizations. I went to a NADA conference in 2018 2019, where John Weeks from the Integrator blog was really speaking to those silos. He
Yeah.
showed, he had his PowerPoint and he was explaining, yeah, NCCAOM, NADA started around the same time, but there's not never really been a connecting point. He talked about the silos within
Mm.
integrative healthcare and then
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the acupuncture organizations. It's been a long time. That's really all I remember from that. But when you're at an ATA conference, you're meeting acupuncturists, you're meeting nurses, you're meeting
Mm.
psych nurses, you're meeting anesthesiologists, you're meeting a whole variety. You're meeting peer counselors, you're meeting licensed drug counselors, you're meeting a huge variety of people. And now in New Hampshire, we offer ear acupuncture trainings through Manchester Acupuncture Studio. We're collaborating with the people who take our trainings, who
Mm.
some are peer counselors, other people are doctors, some people work in education and they want to
Mm.
focus on the preventative aspects
Mm.
of preventing people from misusing substances, and other people want to focus more on recovery, and other people are going to take it into treatment, and
Yeah.
others are focused more on using it as a mental health treatment because it's also for mental health. Many acupuncturists want to say if other people use it, it should be addiction only. Like, nope, mental health, behavioral health, like it's
Yeah.
you know, all there. And that's where all this great collaboration is happening. And if all of these organizations that make up the AHM coalition had been open to Mike Smith and NADA all along, we probably would be further or more well integrated into the healthcare system, or maybe even the public healthcare system, if those interactions would have been able to happen.
Yeah.
um, I can't really speak to NADA at the moment. I'm not a member. There was a big shakeup around the pandemic, and many of their trainers jumped ship and they either got their own trainings approved in other states, and many
Mm.
of them joined POCA. But I can
Mm.
talk about two former NADA trainers in Oklahoma. They're nurses and they now train under POCA. And, talking to them and talking to Libby Stout, who was the president of NADA for a long time, who now trains with POCA, they all say they love acupuncture. They tell everyone to get acupuncture. They get acupuncture by licensed acupuncturists. And in the meantime, all these licensed acupuncturists with these organizations want nothing to do with NADA. And I'm like, these are your allies. Are you insane?
Yeah.
Like, are you
Yeah.
insane?
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's what I kind of have experienced is like this desire, like these groups seem to have desires to build silos when
mhm,
in fact collaboration and cross-pollination is way more interesting and fun and like gets better results, I think,
mhm,
overall. Um, so I think it's a great, I guess, um, sort of litmus test to say, like, are we heading towards collaboration here or isolation? Um, and because in terms of naturopaths, like we're so small, it's like I don't think we can really afford to be isolationist
mhm,
anymore. Like as we were discussing, like to have an independent board is expensive. It's expensive in Oregon. We have, I think, higher licensing fees, and in a lot of states, naturopaths are underneath other boards because there's not enough. There's just not enough people
mhm.
to get enough fees
Right.
to run things, and I think that's just really important to look at. Like ideologically and aspirationally, we have these goals, but it's not right for organizations to pump people up about those without the numbers aspect. And it's like it's going to cost this much money. Do
Mhm.
we want to do this? Because we could be spending that money doing other things, or like what if we spent this money collaborating
Yeah.
instead of isolating
Mhm.
ourselves? And I just feel like those I don't under maybe we're at an inflection point here, but like we should be able to have those conversations as adult professionals who can display a glue slide deck with with numbers and graphs and like reasonable projections. Like we should be able to access external expertise at this
Mhm.
point. Um, and not doing that is like I think a choice that's not gonna pan out well over the next 5 years.
Right. I mean, in terms of what's going to happen, I think it just depends on where you live in the country. I mean, I look at, I didn't focus a lot on California on the state law spreadsheet, even though I could
Yeah,
have. They
yeah,
have their own exam and they don't want anyone in and fine, but their schools are closing. And so
yeah.
they've fought off PTs from dry needling and chiropractors, and good for them, but also their schools are closing. And for a long time, we thought that California had 20,000 acupuncturists. And,
Mm,
according to a blog post written by my colleague Whitney Thornley in Sacramento, California, they were counting inactive licenses. It was
mm.
really, at the time she wrote it, which was 2 or 3 years ago, they only have 14,000, which that's not very many across a really big state.
Right,
You
like that's a
know,
knowable number, right? And that's
yeah.
comparable to all the other like you could say like here's our peer
Mhm,
licenses or here's people who are like out close in healthcare, allied health, whatever, however you want to do it. But
mhm,
like those are knowable things
mhm,
that you would, my expectation is that professional organizations are the ones tracking those numbers and diligently displaying them to the profession and to members, but like it's not happening. I don't like I don't understand like why is this not happening? Um it just feels like we deserve better.
mhm,
It should be better at this point. Like, and I know a lot of things are done in a volunteer way, and it's like, well, yeah, but like sometimes doing something poorly is like it's like a bad substitute for like nothing because if there was nothing then other people would step up,
right,
right? Or like somebody who could do the job well would fill the role. So it's just not always a great
mhm,
rationale to say like, well, it's just volunteer work. Like it's
right.
still impactful and consequential, so like it does need to be improved on over time.
I can say in defense of New Hampshire, it's actually the state. Our board had to file a right to know request with the state to find out how many acupuncture licensees we have in the state. And
Yeah,
so I think it's actually great that they did that. But you're
yeah,
talking about knowable information,
yeah.
and I had been told that the ASA keeps track of all of the state laws. And I
Mm,
looked on their website for that information. Where can I find all the state laws in one place so I could make a spreadsheet?
yeah.
If it doesn't already exist. And I couldn't find it on the ASA website. And then you
Hmm.
interviewed Elaine Wolf Camaro. Thank you. I
Hmm.
read her
Hmm.
blog for years. It was very
Yeah,
influential
that's
for me.
great. Yeah.
And I always heard her say, like, at least one organization should be keeping this information readily accessible. And it drove her, it kind of drove her nuts for years that it wasn't
Yeah.
available. And
Yeah.
she said she contacted the ASA and was told they couldn't find it. So I started working on the spreadsheet and I reached out to her, and she filled in the information for the state of Virginia. And she said, you shouldn't have to do this. This
Yeah.
really should be something that an acupuncture organization does. And I'm like, well, I'm under POCA. We're an organization. Like, we'll
Mm.
just do it. I'll call other POCA members and I'll ask them to help me with this. And also Maddie from who's on the board with you at Oregon College of Community Acupuncture.
Hmm.
Um, and
Well, yeah,
so this,
that would be a way to do it is to identify a contact, an organizational contact, a person or an organization in each state, and then say whatever's realistic, like every 3 years we query
yeah.
these people. So like it's not even a matter of doing a lot of the work. It's just an organizational thing, which
Mhm.
I would call a governance issue. It's
Mhm.
like, what information do we need to make decisions that affect everybody well? Oh, we should probably know about the unique situations in each state on a broad level. And how do we partner? That's the collaboration piece there. Again, it's like, how do we collaborate with our state organizations and then make this national level spreadsheet?
Right.
But yeah, the spreadsheet's great. It's a post on the um, People's Organization of Community Acupuncture website.
Mhm.
Is there anything more you can tell us about it, about your
Yeah.
experience of doing it, what you learned, how you think it can help things?
Well, yeah, I mean, I went into it. It was Lisa Rolliter had suggested it when we were emailing about the upcoming acupocalypse. And when I started working on it, I thought this is good to do because as we're removing the baccalaureate degree in New Hampshire, I
Hmm.
want to find out who will then get which states will get reciprocity in New
Right,
Hampshire.
right.
We were
Yeah,
there was a bill that passed 2 years ago that said that any state whose licensure requirements meet or exceed New Hampshire standards should get reciprocity. And then the New Hampshire licensing board looked at all the states and determined that no state gets reciprocity.
yeah.
And that's when I found out it seemed to come down to the bachelor's degree. So
Mm,
so if we now are just, you have to graduate from an approved, it's going to be an ACAHM approved school. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we have now. We
hmm.
can down the line. I can't fight for every little thing. So,
Right.
but it'll be better. But finding out that we're only one of 3 states that require a bachelor's degree was really interesting.
Yeah.
And so it's New Hampshire, Maine, and New Jersey. And New Hampshire and Maine don't even have acupuncture schools. Um, Another
Mm,
thing that I discovered was only 10 states require active status with the NCCAOM. Um,
hmm.
so, for so many years, I think many of us really believed that you could not get a license in another state unless you kept active status. And I
Hmm.
spoke with plenty of acupuncturists who'd been licensed before me, and they would say, well, in North Carolina, you don't have to keep active status, but you have to have active status to get a license. And
Hmm.
no, you have to read the law, and it says if you need to pass the exams,
Yeah.
and that's part of your licensing requirement. And having active status isn't a guarantee you're going to get a license in another state because they might have other requirements like a bachelor's degree or an
Yeah.
associate's with 30 credit hours of biomedicine, or Florida you might have to take a course in injection therapy, or New
Yeah.
Mexico. Right, so it's we were told this for many many years by the NCCAOM, and wow, it's only 25%. um,
Hmm.
and going into it, even before we were even halfway through, I could kind of see like, I can't predict how this is going to go, but I have a feeling we're going to find out that not that many states require active status with NCCAOM.
Mm,
And they promote outdated information on their website. I told them a few years ago, our law now says NCCAOM or equivalent in terms of exams. Can you change your map? And I was ignored. And someone in leadership at our state association told me that she reached out to them and their map is unchanged. Colorado
hmm.
will accept the California exam, but the NCCAOM website says otherwise.
Hmm.
So, I
Hmm.
mean, they're a large
Yeah.
organization. They want to be seen as sort of the authority of acupuncture in the country. They should have a website that has accurate information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, my impression is that it's my impression is that it was primarily an exam
Mhm.
nonprofit. However, when I look on the website, it's doing a lot of other stuff
Mhm.
like continuing ed and a lot of other things
Advocacy.
that I think I wonder how healthy that is because my general perspective is like the scope should be narrow, like focus on making a good exam
Right.
and improving that over time. And I mean, they make a lot of money from the continuing ed stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should have that be distracting from your primary um, task and charter of doing a high quality exam. Um, so yeah, that's my main thought about that is that it seems like there's a lot of other stuff going on and like the exam credential, the certificate like is not the same as state licensure and
Right.
should not be required. Um, the continual renewal of the certificate should not be required by the state because that's a again a regulatory monopoly and you're trapping people in that. Like it's fine if it's like you pass the exam. Yes,
Mhm.
that's a good checkpoint, and I understand that as a standardized check. Um, but I I think state regulators should not trap people in that
Right,
organization, and they should also be aware of defining like I think a big thing too is like defining what counts as legitimate continuing education because that's another kind of trap that organizations use is like let's make it so that the state board is like very picky about continuing ed and will be pre-approved so then we'll get to approve we'll just choose teachers and we'll do our thing that's already pre-approved and then because people have to maintain status well it's another like revenue stream
right.
that's not directly related to the content of the exam and doing the exam. It's sort of like doing a humble exam
Right.
check that's collaborative. It
Mhm.
ends up being this kind of octopus with entangled with all these other things. And I don't think that ends up very well for the practitioners. I think it ends
No,
up
I
great
agree.
for
Mhm.
the for like the administration of the board
Mhm.
and they have these revenue streams and they're getting money.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't think it's great for the health of the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, no, I wrote about that a few years ago. How, like, what is the NCCAOM? Are they a test agency or
Yeah.
are they a trade association? Because those shouldn't be the same things.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Right.
And I pointed
Exactly.
out the salary of the executive director. And there were a couple people in Polka that said, yeah, but someone in that position should make that kind of money. And then I heard Mark McKenzie on one of the ASA, NCCAOM town halls saying, no, this is the type of salary that's commanded by. And I'm like, yeah, but the rest of us, what are the rest of us making? Not six
Yeah.
figure salaries like,
Right. And
people running the NCCAOM.
yeah. And I think it's important to point out that that was all
Mhm.
made possible and allowed for by the student debt,
Right.
which isn't getting paid back. So it's like you're in this
Yeah.
like you're in this fake
Mhm.
little bubble and it's like it's you're creating a closed system but you're relying on the debt money as the input
Right.
as the kind of sun in the sky that's constantly putting energy into it. It's like all the money is coming from that and but then it gets into the system and then like and all the practitioners don't make enough to pay the money back. um but now they spent all the time and effort and money on getting the education so now you're almost kind of like
Mhm.
it's too late to go and get a different credential. So then you're
Right.
kind of stuck in it. So yeah, I don't have much sympathy for that viewpoint of like, this is the industry norm. And it's like, it's not anymore.
Yeah. No.
That's going to change. Like, but then but then there can be these governance issues where they're so ensconced, they're so entrenched that nobody voted for that compensation package, right? None of the members did, or the board never published their compensation study and gave their rationale. They're just like, yeah, we did one, and like this is what people at these sorts of organizations get paid. And it's like that's not good enough anymore. Like it has to be actually connected to something on the ground. Like it has to be connected to the reality. And I think that's part of just like totally out of touch with
Mhm.
what's happening. And that's why I get really concerned that like these changes are going to hit extremely hard over the next 2 years. And it's a tragedy because the data is there. People have been talking about it for a long time. And there is a like either willful ignorance or like a real like can't be bothered to engage with that kind of stuff. Um, and it's too bad. I think there was a real like missed opportunity over the last 20 years um,
Yeah.
to use good governance and the funding that was available to set things up in a sustainable way. And it's not sustainable now.
Yeah. And again, once I got out of school, the running of the profession I couldn't really figure out a way into until much later
Yeah,
with, getting the AccuDetox specialist law passed.
yeah,
But as we sort of head towards this, collapse with the student loans, like I feel like the least we could do is make reciprocity easier.
yeah,
So I every time there's a natural disaster somewhere in the country, I keep thinking, what if somebody is from New Hampshire and they're in Western North Carolina where a big hurricane just devastated Asheville, where I went to school? Like, what if they want to move here or somewhere else and they're kept out because of licensure? What if someone in California who took the California board and wants to move home somewhere or might have a job opportunity somewhere else, but they
yeah,
can't leave because they're stuck by the regulations? They might quit the profession if they move, or they might stay in an area of the country where it's unsafe so they can keep practicing. Like, and then again, I go back to like when my school closed and I was in a community surrounded by acupuncturists, but nobody really worked together, and there was all this seeming glee over my school closing. Is that what is about to happen? Like everything will fall apart, and some people will be gleeful and move on with their lives, and other people will be, really, really
mm,
impacted, like having borrowed
yeah,
all that money and then
yeah.
their school closes or
Yeah, I think it is really consequential and impactful, and that's why I would like to see more conversation about protecting students and having a lot of real consumer protection, like real information and like real timelines, updated timelines, um, and dignified closures. I think it needs to be the norm. I think dignified closures should be the expectation. And because there have been sudden closures and it is foreseeable, and it's really difficult for students in any kind of training program when your school closes. There's been research done about like, the percentage of students who end up finishing within 5 years, and like it's not. I don't know the exact statistic, but it's not great. Like when your school closes, like it's difficult to transfer and do a different program.
Mhm.
Um, and it becomes worse as there's fewer schools, because you have to move further and further
Mhm.
to finish things. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking about your spreadsheet that you've put together. It's such a amazing resource for people, and I think it gives a great bird's eye view of everything. And so that anybody who's interested in um, learning about regulation and getting into it and starting to have like data driven conversations about it, and about like we're not stuck with the rules we've got. They are changeable. There are people who have changed it. There's people who are engaged in changing it right now. Um, and that's very hopeful for me. So thank you so much for that and for all your work.
Thank you. And thank you for running your Substack and your blog and your podcast. And it's been great being here with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Great.